Thank you, Presiding Officer. A week ago, I lodged the Scottish Conservative vote of no confidence that forced Humza Yousaf to resign in disgrace. This could very well be his final FMQs as First Minister. Humza Yousaf's replacement must focus on what really matters to Scotland. They have to forget about independence and prioritise growing our economy, creating jobs, improving public services. John Swinney did the opposite of all of these things in government, and his leadership campaign slogan, unveiled this morning, is uniting for independence. All he offers...
Members, let's hear Mr Ross. Members.
I'm very grateful for that party election broadcast we will be using in the days, weeks and months to come, because all he offers is more of the same nationalist obsession that has damaged Scotland for a decade, and they are laughing and applauding that. He is fixated on independence, not the things that really matter. Doesn't uniting for independence just mean more division for Scotland?
First Minister.
No, it doesn't, Presiding Officer. Let me say to Douglas Ross, of course he has every right and prerogative to gloat about the position that I am in, and of course made that statement on Monday. The only exception I would take to Douglas Ross is, no, I don't feel disgraced at all. I'm very proud of the fact that I became the first person of colour to be the First Minister, the very first Muslim leader of a Western nation, the youngest First Minister to ever serve in 25 years of devolution. And most of all, I am proud to have served my government, this government, my country, for 12 years on the front benches. Did I get everything right? Absolutely not. And that is very evident and very clear. But can I be proud of this government's record? Absolutely. And let me just talk about the government's record, because Douglas Ross will do his best in the next few questions to talk about personalities as opposed to talk about policies. And why would he want to do that, Presiding Officer? Because when it comes to our policies, the SNP, of course, is the party of free university education. We're the party that abolished prescription charges. We're the party of free personal and nursing care. We're the party of free bus travel for those who are under 22, over 60, those with a disability. We're the party of free school meals, the party of the baby box, the party of free childcare. And what about the Conservatives, Presiding Officer? They are the party of Windrush. They're the party of bankers' bonuses. They're the party of austerity, the party of Brexit, the party of the two-child limit, the party of Boris Johnson, the party of Liz Truss, the party of the cost of living crisis. So with such an abysmal record, no wonder the leader of the nasty party wants to talk about personalities and not policies.
Douglas Ross.
I mean, my criticism of the government was mainly brought on by John Swinney's comments today that says everything's so bad he's got to run for the leadership. And just when John Swinney thought he was out, they pull him back in, because literally there is nobody else. The SNP's man for the future is their failed leader from the past, from one continuity candidate to another. John Swinney was Nicola Sturgeon's human shield. He masterminded the deal with the extremist Greens. For 16 out of the 17 years of SNP government, John Swinney sat round the cabinet table. His fingerprints are all over their most toxic policies. How will going back to the future get the SNP out of the mess that they're in?
First Minister.
Has Douglas Ross never stopped to reflect that for all that he said about John Swinney, of course, John Swinney and, of course, my colleague Kate Forbes are both more popular than Douglas Ross, Presiding Officer. And Douglas Ross seems absolutely determined to talk about personality. So let me remind him about the personalities he associates himself with. Douglas Ross served in Boris Johnson's government. He called Boris Johnson an honest man. Yeah. That would be the Boris Johnson who was not only the architect of a damaging hard Brexit, but Boris Johnson allegedly said to COVID victims, let the bodies pile up high. Douglas Ross then went on to not only support Liz Truss to the hilt,
Members.
he demanded that we copy Liz Truss's disastrous tax plans. Those, of course, were tax plans that utterly annihilated the economy. And that is the Liz Truss who's now engaging in hard-right conspiracies about the deep state. You can judge a man, presiding officer, you can judge a man by the company he keeps. And Douglas Ross's company is Boris Johnson, the Conservative Party of Liz Truss, of Suella Braverman, Priti Patel, formerly Lee Anderson, Mark Menzies, Peter Bone, Chris Pincher, Andrew Bridgen, Frank Hester, and I can see Douglas Ross looking more and more embarrassed. And let me say, that is the company he keeps. I'm very proud of John Swinney, Kate Forbes and all of the company that I keep, presiding officer.
Douglas Ross. Let's hear Mr Ross. Thank you, members. Douglas Ross.
I mean, he's talking a big game now. Has he forgotten? It was just last Friday he wrote this humiliating letter to me, begging the Conservatives and our colleagues here to save his skin. He literally was begging us to save his job. That's how quickly things change in the world of Humza Yousaf. But let's go back to John Swinney. They think John Swinney is a safe pair of hands, but he has dropped the ball dozens of times. He was Deputy First Minister who stood right by Nicola Sturgeon when she obsessed about independence, when she increased taxes, when she wrecked Scotland's public services. He was the architect of the hated Name Persons Law. He deleted every WhatsApp message that should have gone to the UK COVID inquiry in a disgraceful cover-up. He was Education Secretary. John Swinney was Education Secretary, who let our schools spiral down international league tables below Estonia, Latvia and Hungary. The man who oversaw the disastrous ferries deal is supposed to steady the ship. Is this really the best the SNP can do?
First Minister.
Let's then compare records, of course. John Swinney was part of a government that set up Social Security Scotland through our anti-poverty measures, including through the benefits that are awarded through Social Security Scotland. And I can hear the Conservatives saying those anti-poverty measures aren't working. They're estimated to lift 100,000 children out of poverty this year, in very stark contrast to the Conservatives. It is through John Swinney's efforts in education, the foundations that he laid, that we now have more young people going to universities from areas of deprivation than ever before. It's through John Swinney who helped deliver the biggest expansion of early learning and childcare in our country's history. Well, let's look at Douglas Ross's record. Douglas Ross's voting record is there on, for example, websites like They Work For You, who aggregate and assess the voting records of all MPs. On taxation and employment, Douglas Ross generally voted against higher taxes on banks. When it comes to veterans, generally voted against strengthening the military covenant. When it comes to environmental issues, Douglas Ross generally voted against measures
the First Minister.
They're getting worked up. It's all there in black and white. He can't hide from the truth, presiding officer. The website also says that he voted against improving. Oh, I've got them in.
I think we've gone well beyond the point at which we can hear one another. I've only called one person to speak, as far as I'm aware, and I'd like to hear the person who's called to speak, and them alone. First Minister.
They don't like the truth, presiding officer. They don't like it one bit, because that truth shows that Douglas Ross generally voted against measures to prevent climate change. What a surprise. Generally voted against improving air quality. Generally voted against laws to promote equality and human rights. Let's find something he did vote for, presiding officer. He voted for the Rwanda bill, presiding officer. What a shameful act. What a disgrace. So be it John Swinney, be it Kate Forbes or any one of my colleagues, they can stand proudly on their record. Can Douglas Ross stand proudly on his?
Douglas Ross.
Well, Humza Yousaf is lashing out today because he knows it was the Scottish Conservatives that forced him out of his job. And he knows that in the election coming, in seats up and down Scotland, it's a straight fight between the SNP and my party. We'll stand on our record of forcing him out of office,
Let's hear Mr Ross.
Holding this tired and failing SNP government to account. But what will John Swinney and the SNP stand on? John Swinney has confirmed today he will be another divisive nationalist, focused only on independence. His campaign slogan is literally uniting for independence. That means more division for Scotland all over again. John Swinney has been at the heart of the failures that have defined the SNP's time in office. How on earth will the SNP stop failing Scotland if they keep doing the same thing over and over again?
First Minister.
Presiding Officer, colleagues who will be potentially standing for the leadership of my party, they will stand on a record that we will take to the people of Scotland, much like, of course, his party today are taking their record in local elections down in England and Wales. And one suspects, Presiding Officer, that the people will give them a very harsh verdict indeed.
Mr Ross.
And when it comes to the issue of independence,
Mr Ross.
Presiding Officer, let's make it very, very clear that when it comes to a vote on the constitutional future of this country, a mandate that we have stood on and won election after election on, the only reason that Westminster refuses to give that second referendum is because they fear the verdict, Presiding Officer. And why do we need independence? We need independence because this country has suffered 14 years of austerity from a government that hasn't won an election in Scotland since the 1950s. It's because we have a Brexit foisted upon us that we did not vote for. It's because our people are suffering from a cost of living crisis that they didn't create, but they are the ones who are suffering as a result of. So what drives John Swinney, what drives Kate Forbes, what drives every single one of the colleagues beside me and behind me is our social contract with the people. It's the social contract with the people, today and night, to work in the service of all of the communities in Scotland. And I've got no doubt that when we take that record that I stand proudly on and my successor will stand proudly on, I've got no doubt at all that they'll continue to put their trust in the SNP, President.